Magic the Gathering was first released in 1993. Created by a grad student, its goal was to fill the need for a portable board game, something that could easily be played at a convention. It is now 2026, and Magic not only single-handedly carries Hasbro on its back, but also boasts huge tournaments, its own major secondary market, tons of new formats, and tens of millions of players. Between these two dates lies a 33-year gap where the game's creators have been hard at work pushing its boundaries, introducing new settings, new abilities, and new ideas about what Magic's identity should be. The goals and scope of the game have changed in many ways, and with them, the needs of the mechanics. For every slam dunk mechanic that people are begging to see return, there's another once exciting leap rotting away at a 10 on the storm scale. When the game moves on, some things just get left behind. Today, I want to talk about these mechanics, and discuss what things Magic has decided it is not. Let's start with a big one, manual dexterity cards. These are cards that require you to perform a feat of skill. Take Chaos Orb. This is a removal spell with a twist. When you activate it, you pick up the card and raise it above the table. Then, you flip it onto the battlefield from a height of at least 1 foot. It then destroys all non-token permanents it physically touches on its way down. It asks you not to consciously decide what threats are the most problematic, but how many you think you can hit with one throw. For a time, this made sense. If Magic was just supposed to be a fun, portable board game, then yeah, Chaos Orb doesn't violate any of those sentiments. However, I think we can understand why these cards eventually needed to be axed. Magic has evolved to become heavily invested in strategy and statistical analysis, two things which Chaos Orb are not. Imagine you take an interest in basketball. You're working on your fundamentals, dribbling, passing, shooting, and seeing noticeable improvements in your skills. Then, one of your teammates pulls you aside and goes, "Hey, by the way, once a season or so, you're gonna have to play a game of chess. It's not that big of a deal, we'll only get like 2 points if you win, but it's still gonna happen." All of a sudden, something that is not usually called upon for basketball is going to be tested. You didn't sign up for this. If you wanted to play chess, you'd go play chess instead, and now there's a non-zero chance you just quit basketball entirely. Manual dexterity cards are the same way. 99% of the time, Magic is a game of statistics, strategy, and making the best plays with the cards your deck decides to cough up. With dexterity cards, you then also have a 1% chance of needing to diverge from that and hone in on a physical skill. Why not just ditch these cards and make the game 100% strategy instead? They also create headaches in gameplay. Say you're in a tournament. This is a do or die environment, and you need to be playing at your best and grabbing every advantage you can get in order to win. You know there's a dexterity card in Standard right now, and even though few people are playing it, that's not 0 people. So, it would be optimal to counterplay these cards by making your board state chaotic. Putting lands and permanents into weird places, spreading out every card as much as you can, all to minimize the chances of being blown out by a Chaos Orb. We already have issues keeping players from hiding their Arbor Elves and Mana Rocks in their land base for simplicity. Imagine how much worse this gets if it has a mechanical benefit. Another mechanic that Magic has visibly divested from is Ante. This was a game rule rather than an ability, and it went like this. At the beginning of the game, before drawing your starting hand, you and your opponent each take a random card from your decks and put them into the Ante zone. The winner of the game will receive all cards in the zone. If you put a Black Lotus into Ante and they won the game, suddenly you no longer own that Black Lotus. Also of note, this was the intended and default way to play. Although many people chose not to use Ante, playing without was technically a variant early on in Magic. Even if you usually agreed not to play for Ante, some tournaments would enforce this rule. Before we get the pitchforks out though, let's talk about why Ante existed in the first place. It was created in an attempt to solve rich kid syndrome. The idea was, if someone bought all the best cards and was stomping everyone else due to their wallet, not their skill, then Ante would put some fear into them. Oh, you want to play against me with a deck full of Moxen? Well, if you Ante one away, and I win, you're out a couple $1,000s. In practice, this didn't work for a couple reasons. First of all, rich kid syndrome didn't end up being that big of an issue for Magic. Sure, entire decks of the best cards can get pricey, but this game is fun no matter how you play, and you can often make viable decks from pocket change. It's a game infinitely more about skill than money. Also, even if power could be bought, then the person who had the more expensive deck would be more likely to win the anteed cards, which defeats its own purpose. Also, this sucks. It sucks for everybody involved. If you're young, it means watching your friend get emotional as they lose something that was precious to them, or being in that position yourself. Without an income, neither of you can easily buy these cards again if you're playing the game how it's meant to be played. And if you're older, then you and your opponent have just randomly traded cards between your decks after a night of playing together. It's unlikely that you two can make good use of each other's cards. So now you just have to go and spend money reloading both of your decks? Yeah, not ideal. There's also another issue. Okay, so the two of you are now playing a game of chance with stakes. Those stakes have a monetary value, and each player stands to gain that value if a certain outcome occurs. Uh-oh, you know what that is? Gambling! Depending on your state and age, it was very possible that playing for Ante was breaking the law. Now, this wasn't easily enforceable on the playground, but it was still a problem. What was a bigger problem was the fact that this made tournaments that enforced Ante into gambling halls, which would mean that tournament organizers would be required to purchase gambling licenses. No biggie, that's only, $15,000? Yeah, so Ante caused some legal issues that Wizards didn't want to deal with. There's also mechanical advantages to Ante. If you play a mill deck, starting at fewer cards means that you have less milling to do before you reach your win condition. Not a huge deal, but it does technically make mill slightly stronger. The much bigger issue is with cards that care about Ante. There are currently 9 cards in Magic that alter the conditions of an Ante game. In 60-card formats, you can run a total of 4 copies of any one card, which means you could play 36 cards that care about Ante in one deck. They also have this funny little line of text that says, if you aren't playing for Ante, remove this card from your library before the game, and you suddenly see where this is going. Imagine this. Like a sane person, you decide that you don't want to risk losing your favorite cards in a game of egos, so you opt not to play for Ante. Your opponent then proceeds to slam over half of their entire deck into exile. Only 24 cards remain in their library. And that's just with the Ante cards we have in circulation. If we continued getting cards printed for it, there was a future where saying no to Ante meant that players got to start the game with guaranteed opening hands. Safe to say, I think Wizards made the right choice in ditching Ante. The next mechanic isn't entirely obsolete, but I still think that color hosers have been mostly phased out of Magic. The color pie is Magic's greatest strength, ascribing traits to each of the game's 5 colors of mana and encouraging players to select which of these traits they prefer to use. Color hosers are cards that punish you for your choice here. These came in a lot of different shapes: land walk, protection, repeatable removal, and worst of all, land destruction. Despite the variety of options, they shared a common goal: to select a color and ruin their day. With few exceptions, these cards seemed pretty balanced. What they did for the mana cost seemed mostly on par with other cards at the time. What they did to gameplay, however, was brutal. The popular opinion is that color hosers are unhealthy. If you're playing a mono red deck and you're ahead on the board state, a single circle of protection red will stop you dead in your tracks. Magic will always have elements of randomness involved, but randomly stumbling across single cards that can invalidate entire fifths of the game is rough. Also, most of us aren't playing in tournaments, where we'd be facing off against new opponents all the time. The majority of players have a regular playgroup that they get together with repeatedly. Color hosers tempt you to remember what colors your friends play most often, and slap in a couple cards that ruin their day. Then, in return, they should do the same to you. This devolves until suddenly you're not playing decks with robust options made to combat a variety of strategies. Now, it's just a game of who can shut the other player out harder. Hosers also didn't help every color evenly. Many of these were enchantments, so anything that harmed white or green strategies wouldn't be very effective. Those colors have tons of ways to remove enchantments easily. Notoriously, red hate was the most backbreaking. What can mono red really do about that circle of protection from earlier? They also reward decks with more colors. Let's say your opponent casts Boil. Great, all of the islands are gone. If you're playing a mono blue deck, this is probably going to scrub out almost all of your mana. You're set incredibly far back and are probably going to lose. Now instead, let's say you're playing Esper. With 3 colors, your land base is going to survive this setback. You're only going to lose about a third of your lands at worst. I say at worst because you're probably playing a bunch of dual lands to fix your colors. Dual lands often come without basic typings, and so there's a reality in which Boil resolves without doing anything to you. Multicolor decks really don't need this kind of help. It's already a handicap to play a single color due to the fact that you're heavily limiting your card choices. Tacking on the fact that one Wayward Hoser can crush you outright while multicolor decks can shrug them off is probably not the healthiest direction for the game. Okay, let's do a quick one. Non-standard counters. These are counters that lie outside of the standardized +1/+1s and -1/-1s. Back in the day, you could get any variety of permanent stat changes. In an ideal world, cards could increase or decrease stats however much they want, in accordance with what was right for balance. We don't live in an ideal world though, and oftentimes we have to bend the knee to convenience. Non-standard counters are a hassle. In a normal game of Magic, you can represent the counters you'll find with 2 colors of beads, or bottle caps, or whatever else. With non-standard counters introduced, the number of counters you may encounter goes way up, and you almost certainly need the numbers they represent to be on the card itself. Even if you have a perfect visual way of displaying them, then there's the math. It's not easy at a glance to tell what these counters add up to, but you'll have to have that totaled up every time this creature's stats matter. Also, it causes some rules confusion. +1/+1 counters and -1/-1 counters cancel each other out. If you have both on the same creature, you just remove them from that creature together. But the other ones? Does a +1/+0 counter cancel out a -1/-0? What about a +0/+1? Does it only half cancel out a -0/-2? Or do both counters just hang out on the card together? These counters don't really harm the health of the game, but it's so much easier on the players to just streamline the numbers. As the game of Magic has grown and changed, a lot of what was originally planned for it ended up being scrapped. I love looking over the old, busted cards of yesteryear and thinking, what were they doing back then? It shows the development of this game was a very human process. There were flaws, mistakes, and ideas people worked really hard on that just didn't come to fruition. If you've ever made something yourself, this is probably familiar territory. In my early videos, I used to draw every card I mentioned without showing their rules text. What was wrong with me? Some ideas need to be changed or cut over time. Improvement is a process that has made Magic the world's greatest card game. If you have a favorite mechanic that was phased out of the game, then please, share it with me in the comments below. I'm thinking about doing a video on defunct keywords, so, spam me lists of them to make sure I don't miss any. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you liked it or shared it with a friend. I don't advertise, so word of mouth is how this channel grows. If you're a fan of the format, then subscribe to the channel for notifications on when I upload. I have a Discord where I get together with my subscribers for game nights, and a Blue Sky where I post my 2 AM thoughts on Magic. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your night.